Hey guys, welcome back to Xbox On. Some news has just dropped, and it's the biggest bombshell since the one that took out Megaton. The announcement that 18 Bethesda titles will be coming to Xbox Game Pass. From the moment that Microsoft acquired Bethesda in a massive deal that adds 8 more studios to the 15 currently in the Xbox family, players knew that they were onto a good thing. But this announcement means that one of the most stacked libraries in all of gaming will soon be just a button press away for subscribers. So to put it into perspective just how big a deal this is, we thought we'd walk you through a quick history of Bethesda, from way back before the original Xbox was released, and how the studio came to be the gaming powerhouse that they are today. And it all started 35 years ago.
Right, imagine it. The year is 1986. The Oprah Winfrey Show has aired for the first time, Mike Tyson has become the youngest heavyweight champ in boxing history, and a fella named Christopher Weaver founds a company called Bethesda Softworks. And at that time, one of those things probably seemed like much less of a big deal than the others. Bethesda was initially set up as little more than a division of Weaver's engineering research and development company, and its goal was simply to find out whether the PC market might be a good place to sell video games. All of which seems incredibly humble for a company that has gone on to define entire generations of gaming and exert a massive influence over how the entire industry has evolved. But you've got to start somewhere, I guess.
While today we associate Bethesda primarily with morally complicated role-playing games featuring sprawling lands and complex gameplay mechanics, their first real success came from an American football game called Gridiron. It might look charmingly simple, but at the time it was something of a breakthrough. The first ever physics-based sports game of any kind. And it was also the best attempt so far at translating the action on the field into the graphical capacities of consoles like the Atari and the Commodore. It was so good, in fact, that EA quickly tapped Bethesda to come in and help them finish off the first game in a little series called John Madden Football. Heard of it? And speaking of suspiciously violent North American sports with fully licensed video game adaptations, this period also saw Bethesda create the Wayne Gretzky hockey games, which charmed the childhoods of so many 80s kids. But then the 80s ended and it was time for Bethesda to head off in a bold new direction, off towards a magical realm called Tamriel.
So after all that, Bethesda's next big project was a game called The Elder Scrolls Arena, which was released in 1994. And even in this early stage, you can already see a lot of the Elder Scrolls DNA, which would eventually make it one of the most acclaimed series of all time. It featured the same first-person perspective, the same combat blend of weapons and magic, and it gives the player a huge world to explore, literally spanning millions of procedurally generated kilometers. Which is truly mind-bending when you consider that Skyrim's world is 37 kilometers and still feels practically endless. While there was an epic main quest to undertake, you could also go around talking to the various townspeople to open up side quests and hear some other juicy rumors. This Elder Scrolls debut was also one of the first games to feature a realistic day and night cycle, with the shops closing at the end of the day and strange creatures creeping along the deserted streets during the night. In all, it was already well on its way to creating the kind of huge, immersive worlds which Bethesda has now become known for.
Arena was followed up by Daggerfall 2 years later, and then by Morrowind, which brought into play something which has become central to Bethesda's whole design philosophy: choice. In Morrowind, as soon as the game begins, you're pretty much free to roam wherever you like and fight, talk to, or steal from anyone you encounter, which was pretty groundbreaking at the time. With Morrowind, Bethesda also made the bold choice to take a genre which had so far been pretty much exclusive to PC gaming and move it on to the original Xbox. Microsoft's willingness to back them on such a risky venture back in the beginning is something that Pete Hines, Bethesda's SVP of Global Marketing and Comms, mentioned when explaining why they were so excited to be joining the Microsoft family all these years later. Pete said, "When I think back to the first time we decided to shift from being a PC-only developer and make Morrowind for the original Xbox, it was a move that countless people said would never work. Nobody on consoles wanted a game that big and that complex. But Microsoft believed in us, and so did you. And now RPGs of all shapes and sizes are hugely successful on consoles." And once they proved that consoles could provide a great home for these kind of games, Bethesda basically never looked back.
And now, with the arrival of the Xbox 360 in all of its HD glory, it opened the door for Bethesda to press even further into telling the sort of sweeping cinematic stories that they really wanted to tell. This was something they had been experimenting with from the very beginning, adapting popular film and TV series like Terminator, Star Trek, and Pirates of the Caribbean as they tried to work out how to bring all the scale and drama of a Hollywood production into a video game. But the breakthrough actually came when they acquired the rights to an old-school isometric RPG rather than a glitzy film IP. Feeling a bit confused? What if I told you it was a series called Fallout? Revamping it into a full-blown, three-dimensional dystopian nightmare the likes of which had never been seen before, Bethesda created Fallout 3. Its tale of one survivor's journey across the nuclear wasteland in search of their father was quickly recognized as one of the best pieces of video game storytelling of all time, and the game itself received rave reviews pretty much across the board.
Bethesda weren't content with making only one generation-defining RPG though. Fallout 3 was followed up a few years later with The Elder Scrolls V: Skyrim, as the studio brought everything they had learned back to the magical realm where it all began. Combining the intricate gameplay and total freedom of the previous games while tapping into the newfound power of the Xbox 360, they created an unparalleled fantasy adventure. It really is hard to overstate just how massive these releases were. Both games garnered gushing reviews and scooped up piles of Game of the Year awards, while fans were just as excited about them as the critics, with Skyrim alone selling over 3.4 million physical copies in its first 2 days. The success of these series also provided Bethesda with the perfect jumping-off point to experiment with new types of video games. As free-to-play gaming emerged as a major part of the modern industry, Bethesda were quick to get in on the action, releasing titles like Fallout Shelter and a pair of the Elder Scrolls spin-offs called Blades and Legends. These more fun-sized games provided the perfect entry point for players that were new to the series, while also offering established fans a neat change of pace. The 1-2 punch of Skyrim and Fallout 3 established Bethesda as one of the most important developers in the world, and even while they were raking in the acclaim for their own games, they also started lending their talents to promising games being developed by other studios.
So now we're back in 2001, and Bethesda is actually separated into two separate divisions. One to continue developing their own games, and one to focus on publishing those originally developed by others. This allowed them to expand into more action-centric titles, leading to several cult classics like the Grindhouse-inspired Wet, the parkour shooter Brink, or the positively furious Rage series. At the same time, games like Dishonored and Prey continued Bethesda's commitment to offering players the choice of how they want to play, with stories that unfolded according to the decisions they made. All games which chimed nicely with Bethesda's love of creating a grimy dystopian world where the player is let loose to wreak some proper havoc.
And while they were helping to add a bunch of brand new flavors to the Xbox gaming buffet, Bethesda also helped put a new spin on a couple of old favorites. Wolfenstein: The New Order reanimated the supernatural Second World War shooter, while Doom Eternal let players take another trip back down to hell, this time in much better definition. These games massively expanded Bethesda's catalogue, allowing them to cater to a much wider range of players, but they also largely maintained a pretty consistent personality and philosophy, with shared elements like pitch-black humour, grisly settings, and an emphasis on player choice cropping up throughout almost all of them. Basically, this all meant that Bethesda could create more without diluting the things that won fans over in the first place.
So if you're someone who likes to keep an eye on the inner workings of the game industry, then the news that Microsoft had bought Bethesda was clearly one of the biggest of 2020. Purchased for the tidy sum of $7.5 billion, it was clear to even the casual observer that this was going to be a truly game-changing move. Bethesda would bring with them one of the most critically acclaimed and commercially successful games libraries in the whole industry, enough to get any Xbox gamer positively salivating. And now we're getting our first real taste of just how big a difference it will make to Xbox players, with 18 of Bethesda's titles arriving to Xbox Game Pass. That means that all subscribers will have access to everything from their latest and greatest like Fallout 4, Doom Eternal and Rage 2, and some of the classic titles that they first made their name with. But it only gets better from there, because going forward, all Bethesda releases are going to be made available on Game Pass from launch day. Oh my goodness.
In most Bethesda games, the future, well, it looks pretty bleak, with civilization almost always having deteriorated into one kind of horror show or another. But fortunately, that's not the case in real life just yet, and with a bunch of major titles in the pipeline, the future for Bethesda looks brighter than a horizon lit by an exploding atom bomb. Bethesda confirmed back in 2018 that work on the 6th entry in the Elder Scrolls series had begun, and while they have been running the kind of clandestine operation that would make the Dark Brotherhood proud, it's safe to say that it will be one of the gaming events of the whatever year it releases. And for fans who want something entirely new, they also have a bunch of exciting fresh offerings lined up. There's Starfield, the space traveling game, which will be the first all-new IP that Bethesda has launched in over a decade, so it's safe to say expectations are sky high on this one already.
But the game making all the headlines lately has to be the Indiana Jones title, which Bethesda announced they were working on at the end of 2020. Details on this one have been more closely guarded than the Holy Grail itself, but seeing the iconic hat and whip followed by a Bethesda logo has put expectations into overdrive already. But of course, a studio like Bethesda never plays all its cards at once, so you can be sure they've got plenty more in store for the future as well. And so long as you're an Xbox Game Pass subscriber, you'll be at the very front of the queue, along with us at Xbox On, for whatever comes next.
So there you have it. That's the tale of how the newest member of the Microsoft clan went from a little developer with big dreams to one of the most respected, successful studios on the face of the planet. Be sure to subscribe if you want to keep on top of all the latest Xbox news, Bethesda and otherwise, and if you'd be kind enough to hit like on the way out, we sure would appreciate it. Bye!